The audit was supposed to take 3 days. I want to start there because the timeline matters, and because I am the kind of person who keeps timelines. My name is Dale Brunner. For 19 years, I have worked for the Wadsworth County Road Department in the high desert country east of the Cascades, and for the last 8, I have been the maintenance supervisor for District 4, which covers about 900 square miles of the least populated part of an already empty state. My job is unglamorous, and I like it that way. I inspect bridges. I schedule culvert clearing. I sign off on chip seal contracts, and I argue with the state about load ratings. When a logging truck puts a wheel through a deck plank on one of our older spans, I am the man who decides whether to close the bridge or write a work order. I have a reputation for being thorough and slow, and I have never minded either word. In March, our department got folded into a regional cost-sharing arrangement with the utility district, the kind of bureaucratic marriage that happens when 2 underfunded agencies decide it is cheaper to share a billing office than to each keep their own. The practical result for me was that I inherited a stack of cross-referenced records I had never seen before. Road maintenance and water service had been administered separately for as long as anyone could remember, but the new arrangement required us to reconcile our infrastructure inventories so the accountants could figure out who owned what. Every culvert, every access road, every water main and pressure station in District 4 now had to be matched against a master asset list. That was the audit. Reconcile the lists, find the discrepancies, explain them. 3 days, I figured, maybe 4 if the old microfilm reader gave me trouble. I found the first discrepancy on the first afternoon, and I want to be honest that I almost did not notice it because it was the most boring possible kind of error. The water district's billing system tracked consumption by service zone, and each zone rolled up into a maintenance district that matched ours. District 4 contained 11 service zones. I knew all 11. I had driven every road in all of them. But the consumption summary listed 12. The 12th zone was labeled 4. It had no customer names attached, which was not in itself unusual. A lot of our zones contain agricultural accounts billed to LLCs or to estates that have changed hands so many times the name field just says owner of record. What caught my eye was the consumption figure. Zone 4J was using water, not a trickle, not the kind of background draw you get from a leaking main or a stock tank float valve. It was pulling a steady, consistent volume month after month, the profile of a small inhabited community. Somewhere between 40 and 60 households worth, if I had to guess, and I have spent enough years staring at these numbers to guess well. I pulled up our road inventory for District 4 and searched for anything that fed a zone called 4J nothing. There was no road in my system that connected to a zone 4J, no bridge, no access easement, no culvert. I pulled the water district's own infrastructure map, the one that shows mains and pressure stations laid over the road network. Zone 4J appeared on it as a small grid of streets in the northwest corner of the district, up in the broken country where the high desert starts to climb toward the timberline. A subdivision by the look of it. Maybe 50 lots arranged on 4 or 5 short streets. There are no subdivisions up there. I knew that the way you know the layout of your own house in the dark. That country is BLM land and old grazing allotments and a few patented mining claims that haven't been worked since before I was born. There is no town. There is no road in. The nearest county route dead ends at a cattle guard 11 miles short of where the map showed those streets, and past the cattle guard there is nothing but a deteriorated 2-track that washes out every spring. I made a note. I want to be clear that at this stage I was not unsettled, I was annoyed. A phantom zone in a billing system is a data entry problem, the kind of thing that happens when 2 agencies merge their records and somebody fat fingers a duplicate. The water it appeared to be consuming was almost certainly a metering error, a ghost reading from a sensor that had been miscalibrated decades ago and never corrected because no human being had ever looked at this particular number. That is the boring, correct, professional explanation, and I held on to it for longer than I should have. The next morning I went to verify it, because verification is the whole job. The water district's pressure monitoring records are the closest thing utilities have to a heartbeat monitor. Every pressure station logs flow and pressure at 15-minute intervals, and the data goes back as far as the equipment does. If Zone 4J was a phantom, then the pressure station feeding it would show either no flow at all or a dead, flat line indicating a stuck sensor. I requested the historical pressure logs for the station tagged to 4J. It is identified in the system as Pressure Station 19, and Pressure Station 19 is, according to the map, located at the head of that little subdivision in the northwest corner. The logs were not flat. They breathed. Flow rose in the mornings between 6 and 8, dropped through midday, rose again in the evening between 5 and 9, and fell to a low overnight baseline. It is the most universal pattern in the entire water industry. It is what human beings do. They wake up and they shower and they flush and they make coffee and they go about their day, and they come home and they cook and they wash and they water their gardens in the cool of the evening, and then they go to sleep. I have looked at thousands of these curves. There is no mistaking it. Pressure Station 19 was supplying water to people. The data ran back, in 15-minute increments, more than 30 years. I sat with that for a while. Then I did the thing that I think any competent person would do, which was to assume I was looking at a record that had been mislabeled, that Station 19's data was actually the data from some other real station that had been entered under the wrong tag. So I cross-checked the total. The water district produces a finite amount of treated water. It all comes out of the same wells and the same treatment plant, and the total of all the zones has to equal the total produced, minus loss. If Zone 4J's consumption was a duplicate of some real zone, the books would not balance once you removed it. The books balanced with 4J included and did not balance without it. The water was real. It was coming out of the treatment plant, going into the system and being consumed somewhere. The plant had been producing enough for 12 zones for decades, and the accountants, who care only about the total, had never had reason to ask where the 12th was. That was the afternoon the annoyance turned into something else. Not fear, not yet. Closer to the feeling you get when you are walking a familiar trail and you realize you have been walking the wrong direction for half an hour and the landscape, which looked so ordinary, is not where you thought you were. I'm going to lay out the rest of what I found in the order I found it, because the order is the only thing that kept me from dismissing each piece on its own. Any single one of these things has an innocent explanation. It is the way they fit together that there is no surviving. I requested every maintenance record associated with Zone 4J and Pressure Station 19. I expected nothing, or a single decades-old commissioning report. What I got was a working file. Pressure Station 19 had a maintenance history like any other piece of infrastructure. Pump rebuilds, valve replacements, a chlorination upgrade in the 90s, routine inspections at the intervals the state requires. Somebody had been servicing it. The work orders were signed. Many of the signatures were illegible, the way field signatures always are, but some were not, and 3 of them were names I recognized. 2 of those names belonged to men who retired before I started. The third belongs to a man named Curtis Vane, who is 68 years old and still does part-time contract inspection for us, because nobody else knows the old gravity-fed sections of the system the way he does. Curtis had signed an inspection on Pressure Station 19 4 years ago. I called Curtis. I did not tell him what I had found. I told him I was reconciling the asset list and asked him, casually, whether he had ever worked up in the northwest corner past the cattle guard on County 9. There was a pause on the line that went on a beat too long. Then he said, in a voice that was careful in a way Curtis's voice is never careful, that he didn't think he ever had, that there was nothing up there, and was there a problem with one of the bridges because he could come take a look. I said no problem, just paperwork. He said good. He said it twice. Then he said, and I wrote this down within the minute because it landed wrong, you want to be careful what you put your name on with these audits. Once your name's on a thing, it's on it. I have known Curtis for 19 years. He is a plain-spoken man who has never in my hearing said anything that could be called cryptic. I added the conversation to my file and I kept going, and that is the decision I have asked myself about most since. I want to be honest that I did not keep going out of courage. I kept going because I could not make the numbers make sense, and not being able to make numbers make sense is, for a man like me, physically uncomfortable. It itches. I would rather have found a clean explanation and stopped. There wasn't one. The infrastructure maps were where it got worse, and where I started to understand that the problem was older than any data entry error. The water district keeps its maps in layers, and the layers have dates. The current map, the digital one everyone uses, shows Zone 4J as that little grid of streets. But the digital map is only as old as the digitization project, which was done in 2004, when somebody scanned and traced the paper maps that came before. So I went to the paper maps. We still have them, rolled in tubes in a climate-controlled room because the state requires us to retain the originals. I unrolled the District 4 sheets going backward in time, and this is what I found, and I am describing it exactly. On the maps from the 1990s, Zone 4J is there, drawn in the same hand as the rest of the system with street names. Bonner Street, Aldous Street, 2 cross streets and a loop called Vero Court. Lot lines. Service connections drawn as little tick marks off the mains, 1 per lot, the way a draftsman marks a real subdivision he is actually plumbing. On the maps from the 1980s, the subdivision is also there. But the surrounding road network is different because the roads were different then. County 9 took a different alignment before it was rebuilt in 1991, and on the 80s map the road actually continued past where the cattle guard is now. It went up into that country. There was a road in on the maps from the 1970s. The subdivision is there, and it is smaller, fewer lots. Bonner Street exists, but Aldous does not yet. Vero Court is drawn, but the lots along it are not yet subdivided. I was looking at a neighborhood being built, 1 decade at a time, in the official records, in a place where I have personally stood and seen nothing but sagebrush and rimrock, and the foundations of an old stock watering operation. And then I found the engineering documents, which are the part I have the hardest time describing without sounding like I have lost my grip. So I am going to stick to the documents themselves. The original subdivision plat for what the records call the Vero Tract was filed in 1968. It is a real document, or a perfect imitation of one, with the surveyor's seal and the county recorder's stamp, and the cross-hatched legal description tied to a section corner I can find on a real map. The developer is listed as the Vero Land and Water Company. The plat shows 48 residential lots, a water system to be built and dedicated to the district, and a covenant. I have read a great many subdivision covenants in my life. They are tedious documents about fence heights and outbuilding setbacks, and whether you may keep livestock. This one had the usual material, and then it had a clause I have never seen in any covenant before or since, and I copied it word for word. It read, "No lot owner, occupant, or successor in interest shall permit the disconnection, metering interruption, or cessation of water service to any lot for any reason, the continuity of service being the essential condition of this tract, and a covenant running with the land in perpetuity, enforceable by the district against any party including the district itself." I read that clause more times than I can count. The continuity of service being the essential condition of this tract. Enforceable against the district itself. It is written in the dry language of property law, and it is the most frightening sentence I have ever read because it does not describe a convenience. It describes a requirement. Somebody in 1968 built into the foundational legal document of that place a perpetual, unbreakable obligation to never, ever turn the water off. And the district for 58 years has not. I needed to see it. There is no version of competent infrastructure inspection where you find a pressure station that has been logging flow for 30 years and you do not go look at it. So I planned the trip the way I plan any field inspection into difficult country. I told the office where I was going and when I would be back. I took the department's most capable vehicle, the one with the winch. I took water and a satellite messenger and the inspection camera and a printed copy of the maps. I went on a clear, dry day in early April with 12 hours of light ahead of me. I wanted on the record that I did everything right. Nothing about my decision to go was reckless. I have replayed it and I would make the same call again, which is its own kind of horror. County 9 ends at the cattle guard exactly where I knew it would. Past the cattle guard, the 2-track is in worse shape than the last time I saw it, deeply rutted, partly washed out where it crosses the dry drainages, but passable in low range if you are patient, and I am patient. I followed it for 11 miles into country that gets steadily more closed in, the open desert giving way to broken basalt and stands of juniper, the kind of folded terrain where you cannot see more than a quarter mile in any direction. The 2-track, according to my real maps, simply ends at the site of the old Verrill stock watering operation. According to the Water District's maps, it ends at the head of Bonner Street. It ends at a pressure station. I need to be careful here. There is a real physical pressure station up there. It is a small concrete blockhouse, maybe 10 feet by 12 of the type the district built in the 60s and 70s, with a steel door and a vent and a chlorine monitoring cabinet bolted to the outside. It is exactly what Pressure Station 19 should look like. There was a fresh padlock on the door, the shackle bright, not weathered, a lock that had been changed within the last year or two. There were tire tracks. Not mine, not recent, but not ancient either, the kind of compacted track you get from a vehicle that comes through a few times a year on a maintenance schedule. The chlorine cabinet had a calibration sticker on it. The sticker was dated 14 months ago. Somebody services this station. Somebody drives 11 miles past the end of the world to maintain a pressure station that feeds water to 48 lots that are not there, because they were not there. I want to be absolutely plain about this. Beyond the pressure station, where the maps showed Bonner Street running northeast for 400 feet to the intersection with Verrill Court, there was no street. There was sagebrush and basalt and the low concrete remains of stock tanks and a loading chute. There were no houses. There were no foundations of houses, no driveways, no mailboxes, no lot corners, no buried utilities that I could find, no sign that any human being had ever lived in that place. I walked the entire footprint of the platted subdivision with the map in my hand. I walked Bonner Street and Aldous Street and Verrill Court. I stood in the middle of what the plat called Lot 23, where a meter and a service connection were drawn, where water, according to the logs in the office, had been consumed that very morning between 6 and 8 o'clock. There was nothing there but the wind and the smell of hot juniper and the specific, enormous silence of country where no one is. I did the only thing I could think to do. I went back to the pressure station and I listened, with my ear against the cool concrete of the blockhouse wall, and I could hear it. The pumps were running. Inside that little building, water was moving under pressure going somewhere, through mains that ran out under streets that did not exist to houses that were not there, to be consumed by people who, the records insisted, woke up every morning and went asleep every night and had been doing so for 30 years. I photographed everything. The photographs are clear. They show a pressure station in good repair sitting alone at the end of a dead road in an empty valley, and they prove nothing except that the empty valley is empty, which is the one thing about all of this that I never doubted and the one thing that explains the least. I drove out before the light went. I did not panic, but I drove faster than the road wanted me to, and twice I caught myself watching the mirror, and there was never anything in it. What I did when I got back is the part of this account I am most sure of, because it is documented, and the documentation is the reason I am writing this down rather than letting it go and getting a full night's sleep for the first time in 2 months. I went looking for the people. If 48 lots were billed and consuming water, even to a phantom zone, the money had to be coming from somewhere or being written off somewhere, and either way there would be records of human beings. And there were. The billing system, once I knew to look, contained account holders for Zone 4J, 48 of them. They had names. They had names like anyone, ordinary names, Marak and Hell and Soder and Prout, and they had account opening dates, and here is the thing that I have not been able to put down. The account opening dates were continuous across 58 years, but the accounts were not. Accounts closed and new ones opened. the way they do in a real neighborhood as people die or move and others arrive. Lot 23 had been held by 4 different account names since 1968. The most recent had opened the account in 2019. There was a forwarding address on the closed accounts. Sometimes, the way there is when somebody moves away. So I ran the names. Quietly on my own time, the way you can run a name when you have 19 years of relationships across county offices and nobody thinks twice about a road supervisor asking the assessor's clerk to look something up. None of the 48 current account holders for Zone 4J appears in the assessor's property rolls. None of them pays property tax on a parcel up there, because the parcels, the assessor told me, got pulled from the tax map a long time ago. Before the digital system, they're carried as exempt. Don't ask me why. That's a code that means somebody above my pay grade decided it. None of them is registered to vote at an address in 4J. None of them is on the rolls for fire protection or ambulance service. The fire district map, when I checked it, has a clean, unhatched hole in the northwest corner, an island of no coverage in the middle of a fully covered district, and nobody at the fire district could tell me why there was a hole there or even seem to have noticed it was a hole. But some of those names existed elsewhere. That is what I cannot get past. I took the forwarding addresses from the closed accounts, the ones for people who had supposedly moved away from Lot 23 and the rest, and a few of them were real addresses in real towns, and a couple of those, I'm nearly certain, had real obituaries attached. A man named Edmund Soder, who according to the billing records held the account on Lot 31 from 1981 until it closed in 2003, has an obituary in the regional paper dated 2003. It says he died at home. It does not say where home was. It says he was preceded in death by his wife and survived by no one, and it says, in the way these notices do, that he had lived in the area his entire life, and it gives no address, and there is no one to ask. These were people. Or there were records of people, perfect in their ordinariness, born and aging and dying and being replaced, consuming water in a steady human rhythm, in a neighborhood that has never existed in any place I can walk to. I do not know which is worse, that the records are false or that they are not. I went back to Curtis Vane. I did not call this time. I drove to his place, which is a tidy double wide on 5 acres with a shop bigger than the house, and I found him under his truck, and I waited until he slid out and saw it was me and saw my face, and then I told him what I had found, all of it. The zone, the pressure logs, the maps growing backward in time, the covenant, the empty valley, the running pumps, the 48 names. I laid it out the way I am laying it out here in order, because the order is the proof. Curtis listened to the whole thing without interrupting, which is not like him, and when I was done, he wiped his hands on a rag for longer than wiping his hands took, and then he told me the part I did not have, and I am going to give it to you the way he gave it to me, as nearly word for word as I can manage, because it is the only first-hand testimony in this entire account, and it is the closest thing to an explanation that exists. He said that when he came on with the district in the 70s, the old hands taught him the system, and the system included Station 19, and the rule about Station 19 was simple and it was not written down. You serviced it. You kept it running. You logged it like everything else, and you did not ask about the zone it fed, and if you were new and you did ask, you got told the same thing he was now going to tell me. He said the Verrill tract was real once. He said there had been a town up there, or the start of one, a water company town the way they built them in this country, a developer who owned the land and the water and sold lots to people who wanted to get away from things, the kind of people who do not leave forwarding addresses on purpose. He said something happened up there. He did not know what. The old hands had not known what either, or had not said. But the water company had made a deal or made a promise, and the promise was the covenant, and the promise was that the water would never stop, and the district had taken on the water company's assets and obligations when the company folded in the 70s, the way districts do, and the obligation had come with them, and so the water had never stopped. I asked him the only question that mattered. I asked him who lives there now. And Curtis looked at me, and he is not a dramatic man, and he said, "Dale, nobody ever asked me that. In 50 years, you're the first one to go up there and come back and ask who lives there." He said it like it frightened him. Then he said the rest of it, and this is the part I have not told anyone until now. He said that the reason you keep the water on is not for the people. He said the old hands were clear about that, in the way they were clear about it without ever saying it straight. You keep the water on because as long as the water is on, the neighborhood stays up there, in the records and in the pipes and wherever else it is, contained, accounted for, drawing its steady 40 households worth, breathing its morning and its evening, occupying its hole in the fire map, and its exemption on the tax roll and its zone in the billing system. The covenant is not a promise to the residents. It is a fence. And the line in the covenant that frightened me, the one that says the obligation is enforceable against the district itself, is not legal boilerplate. It is the term of the deal. The district does not have the right to turn the water off, because nobody knows what is keeping the consumption steady on the other end of those pipes, and nobody has ever wanted to find out what gets thirsty if you stop feeding it. That was 3 weeks ago. I would like to tell you that I have stopped, and that the rule the old hands kept, the rule about servicing the station and not asking, has become my rule too, and that this account is just a thing I needed to get out of my head so I could go back to inspecting bridges. Some of that is true. I have not been back up County 9. I do not intend to go. But 2 things have happened since, and they are the reason I am writing this down and giving copies to people I trust, rather than keeping it in my own file where my own name is the only name on it. The first is that 10 days ago, a new account opened in Zone 4J Lot 23. The lot I stood in the middle of, where I photographed nothing but sagebrush. The previous account on Lot 23 closed the day after I drove up there. A new one opened 10 days ago, and it is consuming water on the same human curve as all the others morning and evening, and the account opening record lists a name. The second is that yesterday I pulled the District 4 maps again, the current digital ones, to check a culvert on an unrelated job, and I looked, the way you cannot help looking once you know, at the northwest corner. The subdivision is still there. Bonner Street, Aldous Street, Vero Court, the 48 lots. But there is a new street now. It runs southeast off Bonner, a short spur, 400 feet, 8 new lots drawn in the same hand as the rest, with service connections ticked off the main, 1 per lot. The spur was not on the map in March. It is on the map now. And the spur, when I overlaid it on the real terrain, runs down out of that empty valley, down the line of the old 2-track, toward the cattle guard, toward County 9, toward the part of the district where people I know actually live. The neighborhood is being built, 1 decade at a time in the records, and after 58 years of building backward into the empty country, it has, this spring, for the first time, started building toward us. I have not told you the name on the new account for Lot 23. I have looked at it every day for 10 days. I keep thinking that if I am wrong about whose name it is, then none of the rest of it is real either, and I can go back to bridges. So I am going to write it here once and let you decide what it means, because I no longer trust myself to decide. The account on Lot 23 was opened 10 days ago in the name of Dale Brunner. The forwarding address field is not blank. It is filled in. It is my home address, the one I have lived at for 22 years, and next to it, in the field the system uses for the date an account is expected to close, there is a date. It is a date about 4 years from now. I keep the water on. I service the station from the records on schedule, the way I am supposed to, the way Curtis showed me, and I do not turn anything off, and I tell myself that as long as I keep the water on, the fence holds, and the date in that field is just a number in a system that has been telling itself a story about people for 58 years. But I have started to wonder which side of the fence I am on. And I have started to think that the reason no one before me ever drove up there and came back and asked who lives in the Verrill tract is not that they were warned off, but that the ones who drove up there did not come back to ask. They just got an account number and a lot, and a steady draw of water, morning and evening, and a closing date a few years out. and a name in the records that matches a name a man I trust would recognize, in a neighborhood you cannot reach. That is, very patiently, building a road toward the rest of us.